One of the main complaints that we have when we upgrade to the latest version of the Windows operating system is that some of your old applications, inevitably, they won't work anymore. Well, that's true. There's always some application which doesn't work with a new operating system, and that should probably be expected, since with all of the new technology and the new features replacing the old means some things just don't work anymore. But Microsoft has come to the party with a very cool solution to this problem with Windows 7. Since it's Windows XP and not Windows Vista, which is the dominant Microsoft operating system right at this moment, especially in the corporate market, Microsoft wanted to make sure that Windows 7 retained compatibility with Windows XP. How they achieve this is by using a virtual version of Windows XP for you to run applications on that just don't work in Windows 7. The truth is, you're going to find, though, that the majority of applications should work fine in Windows 7. But for those that don't quite work as planned, we've now got another option. So let's say we plan to move over to Windows 7, but in our testing we find that 3 out of our 30 applications we want to run don't work on Windows 7. Well, rather than giving up on the whole idea of running Windows 7, you can still run those 3 applications in a virtual Windows XP session, so it's very likely that they're still going to work just fine, and you can migrate them over to a newer version later on when there's a patch for that application, or when an upgrade becomes available, or even replace that application whenever that's appropriate. So you can still have the stability and the performance and the cool new features of Windows 7, but when you need it, you get almost full Windows XP compatibility as well. Now, I say almost, as it's still likely that there will be some applications that don't work, and Microsoft themselves, they're very careful to tell you that it's not 100% compatible just to cover themselves. But hey, everything I've tried on it works, but it's definitely not a good platform for really intensive tasks like games. But for normal applications, you'll find that it works great. Now, this feature, though, doesn't actually ship with Windows 7. It is a separate download, but it doesn't cost anything extra, so if you need it, here's how you get it. We'll point our web browser to the address that you see here, microsoft.com/Windows Virtual PC download. And before you even download these files, please be aware that there are a couple of requirements you'll need to meet in order to install these things. Firstly, you will need to be running Windows 7. I bet that wasn't a surprise. One of these versions that you see here. You also need to have a CPU that supports Intel's virtualization technology, or an AMD CPU that supports AMD V for hardware-assisted virtualization, or you can download a patch. Let's just scroll down here. In fact, we'll see that in a moment once we select a version. Let's say the Enterprise Edition, and we'll choose English. Now down here you can see there are 3 files we need to download. This third file does enable XP mode for PCs that don't have hardware-assisted virtualization technology. Now, most of the newer CPUs do support this virtualization technology, so if you do have a recent PC, you should be fine, but you can simply check in your own BIOS of your own PC. When you boot up your PC, you're going to need to press a key like F2 or delete or something like that to get into the BIOS, and then you'll be looking for either the Intel or the AMD virtualization section. If you have a CPU that supports it, you'll need to enable that setting and then reboot your machine. So once you've done that, you can come to this page, select whatever operating system edition you have, and these are rather self-explanatory. Also select the language you want to download this file in, again, self-explanatory, and then download these 3 files. Now, do be aware that this first file here is a decent sized file. It's about 450 meg from memory, so you probably want to have a broadband connection to download that file. So once you've downloaded these files and you've installed them, be aware that they do expand out to just over 1 gig in size. So you will want a couple of gigabytes of free space in order to make sure that everything here runs smoothly. Now, as far as system memory goes, you are going to want to allocate at least a minimum of 256 mega RAM from your system RAM to this virtual XP machine. So if you're running a bare minimum system, then you really want to have at least 1 gigabyte of memory in your machine, but 2 gig would be a nice sweet spot. Okay, so once you've downloaded these files, we'll need to install them, and it's pretty obvious. It says download and install this file first, grab this file, install it 1 second, and this one third. So let's just minimize this and you'll see that I have these 3 files right here. So the first one we are going to double click on is the big file here. If we right click and choose properties, you'll see that this one's almost 470 meg in size. So the first thing we're going to do is install that one. All right, so do we want to run this file? Yes, we do. Now that fires up the setup for Windows XP mode wizard. So we'll click next to begin. We're going to run with the default path of program files, Windows XP mode. You can change it if you like. We'll go with the default. We'll click next. And then the installation will begin. Now, as you might expect, this is going to take some time because we've got a pretty big file there, 470 meg, but that file will expand out to over 1 gig, so there is a bit to do. So we're going to pause the video and we'll be back in a moment. Okay, the installation is complete, so we'll click Finish. And we'll need to go and run our second file now, so we'll fire that one up. Now we're asked, do we want to install the following Windows software update? Of course we do. We'll click Yes. Then we'll need to accept the terms of the license agreement, so we'll click the I accept button. And the installation will begin. Again, this will take a few moments, so I'm going to pause the video and we'll be back shortly. Okay, we're done with that installation, but as the installation suggests here, we need to restart our computer for these updates to take effect. So I'm going to pause the video once more, hit restart now, and we'll be back once Windows has rebooted. Okay, our machine has been restarted, so now it's time to launch our final program, and that's this one here. So we're going to run that one. Again, we're asked to confirm our decision. We're going to say yes. And like before, this will take a couple of minutes. So again, we're going to pause the video and come back shortly. Okay, the installation is complete. And like with the previous one, again, we need to restart our computer. So I'm going to hit restart now and we'll be back in just a moment. Okay, so we've installed a few files, we've rebooted a few times, and now Windows Virtual XP is installed. So let's go and click on Start. We'll take a look at our Start menu. So we'll click Start, All Programs. We've got a new option here, Windows Virtual PC, so let's select that. And underneath we have 2 sub-options, a Virtual PC and Windows XP mode. Of course, what we're interested in here is the bottom one, Windows XP mode. So we'll give that a click. And since this is a full copy of Windows XP that we're going to be launching here, first of all, it starts by asking us to agree to the license terms and conditions. So we'll need to accept those by checking the box here, and we'll click Next. Now we'll need to specify a password for this machine. Now it's already given us a base user account of XPM user. So we'll need to enter in a password. So I'm going to type in a password here, and I'm going to do that twice, of course, to confirm the password. Now it also recommends here that we check this box or leave this box checked to remember our username and password combination so we don't have to worry about remembering it. And that's not the security risk that you might ordinarily think it would be. See, normally we're told that when we check these boxes, we lessen our security. With this Virtual XP mode, we've already authenticated by logging into Windows 7 first. So providing our authentication details to this machine is really just a formality. Either way, it's up to you. So let's leave the box checked there, and you can see our installation folder up here is going to be stored at this path. You can change it if you like. We'll click Next. Do we want to use automatic updates to protect our XP virtual machine? Well, ordinarily, I'd say yes to this, and for my own desktop and other machines I use, I do switch this on. But since I'm working with a lab machine here, and I don't need it going off wasting bandwidth trying to update itself with patches and so forth, I'm going to set this to no. All right, we'll click Next, and now we can start the setup. Now, as you might expect, setting up Windows XP mode for the first time is going to take a couple of minutes for it to do its thing. So I'm going to pause the video, and we'll come back in a moment. Alright, well, the configuration is complete and Virtual Windows XP, or Windows XP Mode as it's called, has loaded. So now that we've loaded up our virtual machine, and if we click around the place here, you'll see that this is a real copy of Windows XP with Service Pack 3. Okay, well there's our desktop, our Windows Explorer, our Start menu, and so forth. Now if we do click Start, and in fact let's go and open up my computer, you'll notice that we do have our standard C drive, but if we scroll down, we also have, let's just get rid of these balloon pop-up messages, our local drives available within the virtual machine. That way we can transfer files back and forth between our Windows 7 machine and the Windows XP virtual machine. Now before we go and install any software into this machine though, the first thing I'm going to do is shut it down. And the reason why I'm going to do that is that in order to alter any of the hardware in this virtual machine, we'll need to shut it down first. In fact, before I go and shut it down, let's go and open up a copy of Windows Explorer on our Windows 7 machine. And I'm going to go and navigate to our Users folder, Administrator, then a hidden folder of App Data. We'll go to the local folder, Microsoft, Virtual PC, Virtual Machines, and in this location here, this is where we have our files associated for that Windows XP virtual machine. Now, since this file is running, or since this virtual machine rather is running, we are going to see a couple of things. First of all, we're going to see, well, this file seems to be growing quite considerably as data is being written to our virtual machine, and this is the VHD or virtual machine hard disk file, which contains our whole Windows XP operating system. Okay, so let's go back to our virtual machine, and in the Actions menu, the Tools menu, we're going to choose Settings. And any of you who have experience with Virtual PC or Hyper-V, you guys would know in this Settings area, this is where you can modify the hardware that your virtual machine is made up of. Now, since our virtual machine is currently running, you will note that when we run down this list here over on the right-hand side, pretty much all of the settings here are grayed out. We can't change them. In fact, if we click on most of these settings here, you're going to see they're all grayed out. In fact, the first one actually tells us here this virtual machine must be shut down before you can change the name. That gives you a hint right there. So to change most of these settings, we are going to need to shut down that virtual machine first. So we'll click, we'll click cancel, but we won't. Before we do that, I'm going to go down to this bottom option here, close. And I'm going to change this default of automatically hibernating our virtual machine when we close it, because if we leave it at this state, it's still not going to allow us to make changes either. We'll change this. In fact, we'll change this to prompt for action. That way we can choose what we want to do. So let's click OK. And we can switch back to our virtual machine. Now I'm going to close it by clicking this red X. And here we'll get a pop-up box giving us the three options: hibernate, shut it down, or simply turn the machine off. Now, we can hibernate this machine, which I'd ordinarily do when I just wanted it shut down out of the way, as it will make starting this machine back up a lot quicker. Now, we can shut it down just as we would any normal Windows XP machine, or we can effectively kick the power cord out of this virtual machine by just turning it off. So I'm going to choose shut down, and we'll click OK. And you'll see inside here that the Windows XP virtual machine is just going to shut down just like a regular XP machine would. Okay, so now that our machine has shut down, we're going to go back to our virtual machines folder, and we'll select Virtual PC. We'll right click on our Windows XP mode machine, and we're going to choose Settings. Now this time you can see that we're able to edit all of our options. So let's go through them. On the first one here, name, we're able to set a name of a virtual machine. Nothing special there really. It's called Windows XP mode, but you can change it if you like. Now this isn't the host name of the actual Windows XP machine. It's just a name that we can call this virtual machine really. All right, well, the next option we have is how much memory are we going to allocate to this virtual machine. Obviously, it is defaulting at 256 meg, but you can change that to use more if you've got enough RAM in your machine. Now, obviously, 256 isn't a lot nowadays. I'd like to bump this up a little to at least 512 megabytes of RAM, or even more if you've got the RAM to spare. Well, I'm actually going to throw a little bit more at this. I'm going to throw a gigabyte of RAM, since I've got 2 gig in this machine right now. All right, well, the next option we have is our virtual hard disk, and over here we can see the path to our VHD file, which we saw a moment ago, and that's simply a file that starts out pretty small, but has the capacity to grow up to this size, around 130 gigs. So this VHD file is just a file that, as we work with our virtual machine, it's just going to grow. So instead of writing its files all over your hard disk like you'd normally expect with your machine, it simply writes out everything to this single file that simulates a hard disk inside your virtual machine. Now, if you do need more than one hard disk, we can add in more if we like. So we'd simply choose virtual hard disk file and then go through a very short wizard to create one. Now, we could also add in undo disks as well, which is a cool feature whereby you can use the virtual XP machine just like you would any PC. Now, after you're done with that session and you want to close it down, you've got the ability to either save all of the changes you've made during that session to the virtual machine, or to just discard them and throw them away. Now, it's a great feature, especially when you want to work with testing environments. You can install some software, you can test it, and then revert back to the point where you hadn't even installed the software in the first place. It's really cool, but probably not going to be the most used feature on a client operating system like this, although there are some of you that will see a great use for it. Now, next we have our DVD drive, and currently this virtual machine won't be using any DVDs. However, when we need access to a DVD drive, if we've got media in the form of an ISO file, we can browse by clicking this little radio button here and then browsing to the location where the file's stored on our host Windows 7 machine, and we can use that. Now, alternatively, if we have a physical DVD drive on our host machine, we can choose to access the physical drive. COM1 and COM2 allows us to work with serial ports. With networking, this is where we can choose how we want this virtual machine to be networked. Now, in most cases, you're going to want your virtual Windows XP machine to be networked, but you can turn it off if you'd like to do that. So you could choose to use the internal networking so that only the virtual machine can talk with other virtual machines. You can use NAT, so this machine can talk to other machines on the network just like any physical machine can. Or you can choose a specific network card from the host to use. So this does default to NAT, as you can see. So in most cases, you're going to leave it set at NAT. Integration features we won't change, and this just allows some of these features you see over here on the right hand side to be integrated with our Windows 7 machine and this virtual XP machine. And one of them we've already seen, the hard drives here. You've seen how when we're inside the virtual XP machine, we do have access to the physical hard drives on our Windows 7 machine, but we can also access smart cards, printers, the Windows clipboard, and audio as well if we like. Okay, next we have the keyboard, and this allows us to set how we're going to handle those Windows keyboard combinations, such as Alt-Tab. Now, if we do press an Alt-Tab, what's going to happen is Windows 7 is actually going to take control of the Alt-Tab and not the virtual machine, unless we happen to be running the virtual machine in full screen mode. But we can choose the Windows 7 machine to always handle those keyboard presses, or the virtual machine. That's your choice. Logon credentials. You can see that those logon credentials have been saved, and we did that when we installed the virtual machine, but you can delete those saved credentials if you decide to change your mind. Auto publish is where we can automatically publish virtual applications, and that's a really cool feature we'll talk about in a moment, and you're going to like this one. And finally, we have the close option, which we've already seen. All right, well, let's click OK. In fact, I need to uncheck the ISO. We'll click OK. And we'll go and start up our virtual XP machine again. Okay, well, it's loaded up and it's ready to be used, and since this is a real, albeit virtual, PC, and you need to think of it as a real PC, so we're going to need to install some sort of software on it to test it out. After all, if you're not going to install any software on this machine, then what's the point of having an XP machine running on top of your Windows 7 machine anyway? So you'll see over here on my Windows 7 desktop, I've got this ISO file, which contains a copy of Wireshark, which is a small but popular networking application. So we'll need to mount this file, just like we'd put a DVD disc in a real physical drive. We want to mount this file so that our virtual Windows XP machine thinks we've just inserted a DVD into its drive. So we can do that by clicking on the Tools menu. We're going to choose Settings. We'll select DVD drive. We'll choose to open an ISO image and we'll click Browse. And now we'll navigate to our desktop. There's my ISO disk image. We'll select that and click Open, and then we'll choose OK. All right, now inside our Windows XP mode machine, we're going to click Start and we'll open up My Computer. Now we'll scroll down and select our DVD drive. And inside that is our file that's stored inside that ISO file we just mounted. So we're going to run this. We'll double click on this file and we'll install it, just like we'd install any application really, regardless of what it is. It could be something small like this Wireshark application, or it could be a large application like Microsoft Office. The key thing here is that this virtual XP machine is designed to allow you to run an application that mightn't run properly under Windows 7. So if it does run under Windows 7, then you'd install it there, and that would offer much better performance. But here, we're talking about compatibility over performance. So we'll install this program quickly. Let's click Next. I agree. We'll leave the defaults Next, 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 Next. I'll rather install, and we'll leave it to do its thing. Okay, well, this will take a couple of minutes perhaps to install this software. It's been a while since I've installed it, so we'll pause the video and we'll come back in a moment. All right, well, it looks like the installation's complete, so let's click Next, and then we'll click Finish, and we can now close down Windows Explorer. Now, as you'd expect with any installation, to launch this program, we'd click Start. We'd go to All Programs. We'd locate the Wireshark application, and we'd run the program. Big deal, really. We do that every day. But if that's the way you want to work with this virtual XP mode, by all means go ahead. But let me show you a really cool integration feature here. Instead of launching this application here, we're going to shut down our virtual machine. So we're going to click the X and we're going to choose Shutdown. And then we'll click OK. Okay, so that's shutting down, and it'll only take a couple of moments to completely shut down. So now we have no active virtual machine. You can see that our machine has been powered down. Now here's the really cool part. If we click Start on our Windows 7 machine and go to All Programs, Windows Virtual PC, you can see we've got a new folder here, Windows XP Mode Applications. So let's open that up. Inside here, we've got our Wireshark application. So there it is. Now, if we run this, it's first going to fire up our virtual Windows XP and then run the application. But rather than running it on the XP desktop, as you might have expected, it's going to do away with the desktop entirely, which is still actually running in the background. We just won't be able to see it. So Virtual XP is still actually in control of this application we're about to launch. And there you go, it's fired up. It even has the old XP style title bar here. We're just launching it from within Windows 7. So how good is that? XP compatibility on a Windows 7 desktop. But is it quick though? Well, that depends on your hardware really. But if I close Wireshark here, since Virtual XP is still open in the background, if I go and click Start, and we'll go and fire up our copy of Windows XP mode, you'll see that it's pretty quick to open back up. Now, the slow part is the first time you want to start it up, as it has to start up the XP operating system first. All in all, though, it's a pretty quick thing. So in this video, we've talked about one of the great features of Windows 7, Windows XP mode, or Virtual Windows XP, whatever you like to call it. What makes it so good is that no longer do you need to worry about backwards compatibility with old applications before you upgrade to Windows 7, since you've got Windows XP available from within Windows 7 if you need it. Remember though, it's not a guaranteed technology. Microsoft, they're pretty careful not to promise you 100% compatibility for your applications, but it still is XP, so it's highly likely that your applications will run using this virtual technology. So if you have a real need to run an older application, and if Windows 7 doesn't run it natively, then it's a good bet that Virtual XP will. So we hope you've enjoyed this video and would like to thank you for watching.